I'm working on turning the remains of an old rototiller into this ridiculous off-road scooter thing. I don't know, but I do know that it would be better with a front wheel, so let's work on that. And like in the last video, the goal here is to not buy any parts for it. I guess I should start with the head tube, and I was looking at using these wheel bearings from the Jeep. I've got this piece of tube that's almost the right size, but I kind of feel like this is just too big. I think this piece of trailer axle is a little bit better size, but I don't have a good bearing for it. But I do have an assortment of loose ball bearings, so maybe we can make our own bearings. I started out by truing up the ends of what's going to be my head tube so I have something consistent to press the bearings onto. I've got a round nose tool that I'm using for cutting the seats into the bearing races. I don't think these need to be perfect, and I'm not going to harden them. I'm hoping that they'll sort of burnish and work harden themselves through use. We'll see if that works or if it's wishful thinking. That feels like it almost wants to go on, which I think is where we're going to leave it. And then a second one that's almost exactly the same magically appears. I think before I do the other races on this, I want to do the steerer tube. I've got a nice piece of pipe here, but chucking this in the lathe, there wouldn't be anywhere for a center hole. So I 3D printed a little plug with a center hole in it. I really wasn't sure if this would work at all or how well it would work, but it worked extremely well. That came out exactly the size that it is. This didn't need to be any particular size, but I settled on 1 5/8, and I reduced the center section to make it easier to press the bottom bearing race on. And threaded the end with 16 TPI thread. I like using multiples of 8 because the lead screw on my lathe is 8, and then I don't have to watch the threading dial. I like using this bullnose end mill for doing nuts like this because it leaves a nice little fillet transition from the round part to the, well, in this case, octagon. And one last race for the bottom of the steerer. For mounting the front wheel, it probably makes sense to just use the trailer hub that matches those wheels. But I'd like to keep this axle intact so I can use it later. The bearings on this didn't quite want to slide on there. I let that cool off a bit and then hit it with some emery and it slides on now. Something extremely satisfying about cutting a thread just by the numbers and having it fit just right. Kind of want to do this with a little bit of an offset, so I'm going to start out with a 1/4 inch end mill. Now I can run the hole saw with a straight pilot in it, hopefully keep it from walking around quite as much. Since the tube I'm using has a weld seam on it, this plug needs a little slot for clearance. I debated just trying to clamp the trees onto the fork here, but because it's a single-sided fork, I was worried about twisting forces on it, so I went ahead and welded it. Maybe I can put a little too much load on this. Yeah, it'll stay up enough. Okay, that works. The problem I'm worried about is the wheelbase getting too long on that. Stand on. Not sure I trust this. Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, that's plenty of room. We should talk about rake and trail. No, I said rake and trail. Oh. Rake is the angle that the steerer tube is tilted back. Trail is the distance between where that line would hit the ground and a vertical line going through the hub would hit the ground. Vastly oversimplified, more rake means more trail, which means more stability at speed, but less maneuverability. I tried to look up what the proper amount of rake is for a fat tire off-road monster scooter, but couldn't really find much. So I think I'm going to go about 75 degrees. That should give this thing a good bit of maneuverability at low speed, which is where it'll spend most of its time. And it puts the handlebars at about the right angle. Well, the laser line makes it look like that's pretty well centered. I measured here. I think I'm just going to start tacking on some scrap metal to set that in place. I vastly misjudged the way these tubes would intersect with the head tube. These tubes are slightly larger diameter than the ones on the bottom of the frame, but with the bend at the bottom, they didn't really fit over. I just cut some slots in, and then tacked and kind of bashed it into place. I made the plate on the top bigger so it'll eventually transition into the footboards and kind of serve as part of a front fender. I welded the cross member in so it overlaps the seam where these two are overlapped. Should it strengthen it a little bit, I may add some more gussets, either in here or here. I also centered it up on these two holes, so I can use those for mounting the footboard. But I feel like that's pretty beefy for now. I didn't get these tubes perfectly lined up, but I mean it's made out of an old elliptical machine, and the head tube should be in the right place, so I think it'll be pretty good. I found the carriage bolts from the rototiller. Using those will mean I won't risk hanging up on the bolt heads. I aired down the tires on this to see how stable it is. It'll almost stand up on its own. Yeah, I think that'll work. Let's figure out these handlebars. About like that, maybe? Trying to figure out how I want to mount the handlebars. That's the original mount. So that fits over that. That already fits in there. And now if I got this right, this should just barely fit. I got a little ahead of myself and cut the wedge on this off camera. I'm not going to say I didn't think through the order of operations, because I did, but then I just went ahead and did it the hard way anyway. This piece gets threaded and the matching piece gets a clearance hole through it, so when you tighten them together it expands into the steer tube and locks it in place. I decided to just skim a few thousandths off this just so it would fit in a little bit better. Well, I went ahead and test fit this thing off camera, and I'm not convinced that that bottom wedge is going to come back out. Not that it really needs to, but it tightens up really nicely. I cut this off to save a little bit of weight, cleaned it up. After welding, I chucked this back in the lathe and cleaned up the part of the weld where I welded on the step on the solid piece rather than welding on the seam. Well, I guess the only two questions now are, how much does this weigh? 131 pounds? 60 kilograms? And does it scoot? Oh man, that is totally rideable. Yep, it'll scoot. Once I get some controls and get the motor tuned, I think this thing's going to be a lot of fun. As always, thank you to everyone that supports the channel, either through YouTube memberships, Patreon, by buying merch from jerrymakesthings.net, and just everyone who watches the video. Thanks for watching.